Thanks, and welcome to the Wednesday, October 11th, 2023 meeting of the Redmond Planning Commission. Call this meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Woodyear.
Present.
Commissioner Aparna.
Present.
Is it just me, or do we have an echo going on here? Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Present.
Vice Chair Weston.
Present.
And I am Chair Sherry Nichols. I also want to note staff who are extending their workday to be with us and support us tonight. We have Glenn Coyle, Jeff Churchill, Ian Lefcourt, Becky Fry, Lauren Alpert, Audra Cardenas, Jenny Liebeck, Jeff Churchill, and Chris Wyatt. Before we approve the agenda, I would like to amend it so that we do item number 6, Redmond 2050 Human Services Element, second draft, right after items from the audience, ahead of the downtown and community design policies, because it's a shorter item, so we can get that done quickly out of the way. And that will allow Ian to log off earlier. So with that change, I look for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the agenda is adopted. We also have the meeting summary from the September 13th, 2023 meeting. Look for a motion to approve that summary.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that is approved. This is the point in the meeting where we take public comment on any item that is not the subject of a public hearing. And Mr. Morton.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm David Morton, 19934 Northeast Union Hill Road, Redmond 98053. The Redmond 2050 Supplemental Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or SDEIS, identifies several predicted impacts to Redmond's water resources resulting from implementing 4 growth alternatives examined by the study. One possible impact to groundwater is that increased impervious surface in Redmond would allow less water to infiltrate soils and recharge the aquifer. An increase in impervious surfaces is expected to cause a reduction in the quantity and quality of water that reaches the aquifer. Construction activities may cause spills of hazardous material, such as fuel. The SDEIS points out that downtown and Marymore Village are already largely developed with impervious surface. It's unlikely there would be notable additional impacts to the groundwater. The study does not mention that much of the development in downtown and Marymore Village is recent, and that much of southeast Redmond is not already developed with impervious surfaces. To accommodate an additional 2,850 jobs in an industrial growth center in southeast Redmond, lots of new impervious surfaces would be built on the Critical Aquifer Recharge Area, or CARA. The SDEIS suggests some solutions or mitigation for impacts on groundwater, including amending the city's CARA regulations to be consistent with the current guidelines for protecting CARA functions and values. The Department of Ecology published these guidelines in its Critical Aquifer Recharge Areas Guidance document. The guidelines emphasize the importance of using best available science to protect CARA functions and values, and involves knowing what contamination threats to drinking water already exist, what future contamination threats will result from new development, and what measures are needed to prevent contamination of the aquifer. The Growth Management Act requires the use of best available science for CARAs. The Washington Administrative Code, or WAC, lists the characteristics of a valid scientific process that produces reliable information, including peer review methods, logical conclusions and reasonable inferences, quantitative analysis, context, and references. It then lists sources including research, monitoring, inventory, survey, modeling, assessment, synthesis, and expert opinion. In the absence of adequate scientific information, it's especially important to use a precautionary or no-risk approach, which is of paramount importance in preventing contamination of the land surface. By the time a contaminant is detected at a well, groundwater is already contaminated. In the precautionary approach, development and land use activities are strictly limited until the uncertainty is sufficiently resolved. The Critical Areas Handbook recommends applying best available science up front during the planning process. Redmond's understanding of how best to regulate land uses that may impact its CARAs is important in ensuring that zoning and project permit decisions are being made without the need to complete expensive environmental review and new studies during the permit process. Good upfront planning and the adoption of scientifically defensible development standards should lead to quicker permit decisions. Many jurisdictions require that those applying for new development permits submit reports that demonstrate that the functions and values of CARAs will be protected. The applicant must submit an inventory of critical materials or potentially polluting chemicals that will be handled by the proposed industrial business. And the applicant must demonstrate that the business prevents pollution and it allows a recharge of the aquifer. In conclusion, the SDEIS suggests that Redmond can improve its CARA regulations by following recommendations in Ecology's Critical Aquifer Recharge Areas Guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Redmond 2050 Human Services Elements Second Draft Study Session. Ian, you want to kick us off?
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Hello, my name is Ian Lefcourt. I'm a senior planner in long-range planning. I use he, him pronouns, and we're here to talk about draft 2.0 of the human services element. The human services element directs the city's efforts in planning, funding, coordinating, and improving human services delivery, and it largely impacts equity in our community-based outcomes. The initial conversation with Planning Commission for the draft 1.0 policies occurred in April of this year. Overall, Commission feedback was supportive of the overall direction, and there was some feedback about kind of making sure that the language was more plain talk, that the goals were more pragmatic and less specific to help encompass more opportunities for city direction. And we have reflected that into the policies before they were then shared with the Human Services Commission on September 11th of this year. That Human Services Commission expressed its support for the elements and approval of the direction. The two pieces of feedback there were, one, kind of a discussion about the organization of the document itself, and two, a discussion about how much we wanted to put the diversity, equity, and inclusivity goals into the human services element itself. At this point, the human services element does explicitly have policies that talk about addressing populations that have been historically underserved or outright excluded. And there's opportunities to add further discussion in the human services element, or perhaps front load that in, say, the introduction of the comprehensive plan. But overall, since the Planning Commission previously reviewed the policies, most of the changes are relatively straightforward. So, for example, we had a comment from a commissioner about our policy on utilizing external funds, and that was HS 8, and it said something like utilize available federal funds such as CDBG funds. And the question from the Planning Commission was, do we need to be that specific? And the answer was no. So staff took that feedback and simplified it to just external funds. So overall, we tried to create more plain talk and pragmatic policy language. I can share the element and we can walk through the policies, but at this point, I would like to open it up to the commission for general comments about whether you think the direction is going in the right way, and if you see any red flags that you would like to call up immediately.
Commissioners? Nobody has any red flags. Commissioner Parna has her hand up.
I don't think they're red flags per se, Chair, but a couple of specific ones on the policies itself. I think the direction's great. I think it reads better than the previous version. So do we get into the specifics now or later?
Well, we can go into the specifics right now.
So in which case I'll just get to number 5, HS 5. I think the wording is a bit awkward. I would recommend something like culturally and linguistically appropriate services that are equitable to the whole community. Because it's reading the too many ands over there, so something like that would work. Then on 19, oh, by the way, I loved HS 14. I think it's wonderfully worded, and I think it's really important to mention the fact that we want to do this in a way which ensures people's dignity and attaches no stigma, so that's wonderful. HS 19, I think personally, I would like to see, like we've mentioned, the school district and partnering with the school district, businesses, and so on. I don't know if you want to get very specific, but I think the library system, because it's a quasi-government system, and maybe even the court system, because a community court is a significant part of this whole process of serving the population and the idea of restorative justice. I don't know if that's overreach, but that's something that I think would be nice. And the other thing that I think we should mention are utilities like, the energy, water, internet, and telecom providers, because human services without those basics, it has to be integrated into their work as well. So that's something that I think it would be nice to be a little more specific on that. And last is a very nitpicky point. I apologize in advance. It's the FWHS4. I don't know if there needs to be a comma after new. So it's just right above there.
I would get rid of both commas, actually. Just strengthen existing and pursue new partnerships and collaborations.
Yeah. Right.
Get rid of both these commas.
Yes.
Aye, aye.
Yeah, that was it for me. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weston.
A very small one. For HS 8, I think that extremely low, and moderate income is probably defined like a very specific definition, but I'm not entirely clear what that is. So actually converting that or even if you just use these words, also referencing the meaning, because I think that that's going to be something that's hard to look up. But it sounds like it has a very specific intention.
Right. Okay, so would you like us to define those terms earlier in the element, or would you like us to simplify the policy language to just capture the spirit of it?
I like having it right in the policies, but I think either way, a footnote would also work. Just something where there isn't, like right now, I don't think it really has teeth because you could define that. You could gloss over the fact that it has a definition.
Right, yeah, I mean, it's like, so in housing, I know roughly, I mean, I know what we use, and I know what the school district uses to define things, but I don't know what, and those are different things.
Right.
And I don't know what this is. So, I mean, it's different organizations use different terms and different definitions for determining what these things are, what these parameters are in different contexts. And so just reading that, I don't know which one is being used.
Right, and I do want to make sure that, like, this is serving a need in the community, so I want to make sure that it's crystal clear so that people know when they need to apply this policy.
Right.
But other than
Got
that, it
it.
looks great.
Anything else? No? People seem happy with it, Ian.
All right, thank you so much. We'll get those changes integrated, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to Redmond 2050 Downtown and Community Design Policies, first draft study session, picking up where we left off last time, and I'll turn it over to Becky and Lauren.
Hi. All right, let me share my screen here. All right, can everyone see the policies?
Yes.
All right, so I think this is where we left off at DT 14. Plan and provide for changing recreational needs. We could just go through if anyone has comments on anything. Any comments on DT 14? DT 15, we're deleting that. We kind of combined the two, DT 14 and 15. DT 16. I can't see if anyone's raising their hands or anything, so.
Yeah, I don't, Aparna, did you raise your hand? Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think for DT 16, I think we should talk about vibrancy, 18 by 7 or 24 by 7. The idea that we want to talk about it. I think the vibrancy piece is kind of something we should add here. Because we really want to emphasize that the city lives a little past 8 p.m. So, so yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anything for DT 17, gateways? Is there anything in the room?
No.
Okay. DT 18 wasn't deleted. We sort of combined that with DT 16.
Commissioner Weston has something.
Okay.
So I did want to actually just on this one, I didn't see the access to the Sammamish River specifically included in DT 16. And I would like to, we have so few ways to get to the water in Redmond that anytime we can preserve one, I think it's really important to call that out in policy.
Okay.
And that would be specifically for people who are trying to do water sports or like beaches, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that did come up, especially when the senior center construction started, because that back lot used to be one of the places to put in for kayaks, or paddleboards.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that that was felt as a temporary loss, but I'm hoping it's not a permanent one.
Since I think a lot of the main crux of this D16 is about the arts and cultural facilities, well, I guess we have stuff about open spaces here too. So there is some place to add it. But I wanted to check if you would be open to adding and strengthening that language in maybe another policy as well.
Yeah,
And
that
not
would be
necessarily-
wonderful.
okay.
Just
Okay.
preserving that access to the Sammamish River, as long as that ends up
Okay.
somewhere in this document, I'd be thrilled.
Okay, great. Okay. Just wanted to check.
Commissioner Nueva Camina?
Lauren, would that be appropriate to add into DT 14?
Potentially, yeah. I can explore if it works there, plan and provide.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I just wanted to, like, I'll look and see where it best fits.
Yep, perfect.
That is a good suggestion. I agree, that's important. Okay. DT 17, did we have anything? Oh, no,
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I had one on DT 17. I think I brought this up in the previous one about how it's again one more policy dealing with connections and connectors, trails, transit, so on. So I don't know if we are clubbing them, but it's kind of interesting to see so many of them focusing on that. Maybe they're all put together, or at least, as part A, part B, part C, or I don't know, but it's again one of those things that I referenced in the previous session. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a good observation and something like to kind of, especially as we move from draft 1 and draft 2, so like as we move things around, it's a good thing to flag. And there's that DT 18. We sort of combined some of DT 19 and D16 as well. DT 20 was moved to character and design section. So this was updated and moved as well, DT 8. If we want to look at this now, because we're in that section.
Commissioner Weston?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think this one's excellent. I don't really have any changes, but I think it's really important. I was glad to see it in here.
I'm just going to write thumbs up.
Yes, please.
In my notes right now.
Good summary.
Shorthand. DT 21. And this was sort of kind of that streamlining, and not necessarily repeating a lot of what will be incorporated into the transportation element and the TMP.
Yeah. To move all the details of it into the transportation element.
Yeah, like we will be continuing to promote transit and active transportation routes, especially in our downtown. And that DT 21.1 was also sort of deleted in that same vein. We moved DT 22 into the community design chapter, which we'll be reviewing later this evening.
Commissioner Weston?
This is a very small typo on DT 23. If you could just change it to policy has been implemented.
Oh, you don't want it implanted?
Thank you.
Good eye. Thank you, Commissioner Weston.
We're going to implant policies from now on.
Although it goes with my theme of I usually describe what we do as, we set the soil for other people to help things grow. So maybe, that goes with that theme.
And
Um,
same for DT 24 as well.
It says implemented.
Implemented.
Yeah, it's got it there. The last one had implanted. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, I'm scrolling when I don't mean to be. Okay, so this is a new policy. Improve access to downtown destinations by actively managing public parking and encouraging private parking operators to manage their own supply.
Commissioner Weston?
So I had questions about this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with it. I would love to know how you're picturing both the public and private parking management. Like, what are the goals? Like, what are... Sherry says charging for parking, which may be a goal, but it's not actually in this. So
Okay.
are we thinking 24-hour? Are we thinking temporary and people have to move? I'd like a little bit more, in a policy doc, I'd prefer to see a little bit more,
Of what we're actually trying to
like
do.
a definition, like what is the goal of parking downtown? Like where would we even want surface lots? Where would we even, my guess is far fewer places, where would we even want street parking? Like, are we picturing that people come and park like for long stretches of time and occasionally move their cars? Or are we picturing spots where they're just constantly changing? Anyway, this question, it sounds like Jeff has ideas, but I just have a lot of questions.
Yeah. I mean, Jeff, if you want to speak to that, I know you can speak to it a little bit more closely.
Sure. So two things. One is it's dynamic, right? So what we do to manage parking in downtown depends on the conditions in downtown, and those are going to be evolving over time. The second thing I want to say is that in the transportation master plan, we're planning basically a curb management plan where this will all be spelled out in much more detail. So I think that's where you would find the nuts and bolts of it. And we can certainly work on something more descriptive here, but that's the location where I would direct anyone to when it gets written.
Probably
I was
reference that
That would be a great idea.
in here.
So that's a good idea.
I was also thinking we could more explicitly state the goal that it's to use the parking that we have available with public and private more efficiently.
Yeah.
Um,
Commissioner
so-
Woodyer.
Yeah, this policy comment also troubles me because my perception is that we're falling way short of this, of anything close to this, to achieving this even today. I don't think this has a lot of teeth. It doesn't have enough specificity. Yes, I haven't seen the transportation master plan, so references would be a good thing. References would be a good thing, but really making sure that a policy actually gives enough guidance to actually be able to achieve a meaningful outcome.
Yeah, thank you for that comment.
I think this is short.
yeah, we can make it better. Thank you. Anything else?
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Just more of what's already been said, because I think when we're leaving it up for definition by private parking operators to manage their own supply, to actively managing public parking, I read it and I was like, okay, what does that mean? Because we've got, things where we haven't made the definition and things have gone uncapped or unregulated or without definitions, and it gets wild real quick. And because we are shifting so quickly, then also how can we ensure, or maybe not ensure, but help guide that how they are managing is pacing with how dynamic we are?
I think in general, in Redmond, we have a large opportunity to improve how we manage parking in downtown, both the public supply and the private supply, including how the management of those supplies are coordinated at all, because I wouldn't say they're coordinated now. And you know, the goal might not be perfect coordination because there's a certain amount of discretion that property owners have in managing their own parking supply. But there's lots of room for improvement.
Anything else? We can dig deeper into this when we get to the transportation. Then we can fight over parking.
Dare I say we can park this item for right now and
Oh,
move on to DT
out
25.
of order, out of order. Okay.
Our pun's not allowed at planning commission anymore. Okay, so now we're starting to get into those policies where, as I recall, we're consolidating zoning and land uses in downtown. And so this is the downtown core policies. So this kind of incorporates where Old Town, City Hall is, and kind of that middle section of downtown. So just to give you, like, you see the new section header up at the top.
Commissioner Weston.
Yeah.
I had a question about DT 27.
Okay.
Specifically, which 18 hours? My kids, when I asked that, they were like, maybe it's a siesta in the middle of the afternoon. And I was like, long siesta, but maybe. So we just, I like the thought here that we're sort of expanding nightlife and having more options at different times of the clock, but I'm not sure 18-hour city is meaningful.
Okay.
I think it means something, but it doesn't mean something to me.
Okay. No, that's a good question. And like kind of using consistent language, like maybe just instead of saying 18-hour, just having it as like an active nightlife.
Right, and we could even say like active nightlife into the late evening or something that makes it clear that we're not talking about 8 p.m. and we're not even talking about 9 p.m. But it just, this specific 18-hour, I've been seeing it come up a lot, but it's actually used differently and I'm not sure.
And then also to this question too, as we've been doing a lot of our community engagement and especially in talking to younger members, like high school students, you know, they have a need for nightlife and a lot of places open in the earlier evening are not necessarily catering to like, 18 and under. So,
Right.
we may want to also expand this to include something about that as well.
Right, and I wouldn't want to actually also see this used as like preventing noise or traffic movement or deliveries that are early hour also. So I think it's unnecessarily small.
No, that's really great feedback. So yeah, that's a term we've been kind of throwing out and it may not be clear to everybody.
I
I'd
like
like
it.
to
It seems
add
like
to
it's
that.
evoking something, but it's
Oh, sorry.
sorry, crosstalk. Go ahead, Aparna.
I think this is something that could be either like if it's going to be used a lot, maybe it deserves a definition, like the 15-minute neighborhood, the 18-hour neighborhood.
Right.
We measure our neighborhoods in time right now. But I wanted to add one more thing on DT 27. We want to support economic development measures and also I don't know if here this is a good place for it, but also talk about ensuring there's no displacement of current, so we should reference displacement for these smaller and cultural activities that are already there, I don't know if you want to put that in here, but it's just a thought, so.
Somewhere, whether it's here or somewhere else. Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Lauren, in DT 27, would it be appropriate to add something about various age groups?
I mean, because we are seeing our average age in Redmond going down to 33 right now. And we just mentioned, we brought up the high schoolers, and I've heard from several high schoolers as well around wanting something. They really love the idea of a vintage throwback arcade. But having something in there that specifically shows inclusivity of multiple generations.
I remember back before Borders closed, the high schools used to hang out at Borders, but then it closed, and I don't know where they hang out now.
I just wrote a note. It's like, if this is the policy, it's the best policy to reference it. If not, another place that it should be referenced. Like, it should be referenced someplace. If
Yeah.
not here, someplace else. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. Anything else on DT 27 or the previous policies in downtown core? Where I keep scrolling. Okay. We've got DT 42. We do speak here to accessing the river trail, but not necessarily a specific river, or specifically to the river access.
Yeah, this might be a good place to,
Yeah, this seems like a
river
great
access.
place for it. And making it clear that we mean people getting on the water if possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would, this is a weird thing this might be overly specific, but I think part of what makes that possible is parking. Like, because if people have boats or whatever, like they need,
it's hard to take your boat on light rail.
but even there's some places where it's like you can bring your boat, like kind of temporarily get your boat in and then park somewhere else. Like if you bring a friend with you.
Or like unload the boat, yeah.
Yeah, something where you can get close enough to the water that you're not like strongly carrying your boat everywhere.
Agreed. Carry kayaks and paddleboards distances, and it's not pleasant.
No, it's awful. It's one of those, it seems like a good idea until you try to do it. And then
Yeah.
Just need to lift weights. That's right. Get those,
Is there
get those shoulders loosened up.
anything else for D42? Excuse me.
Nope, don't say anything.
Okay. D44. Anything on D46?
Commissioner Weston.
sorry, this is another definitions one. So I'm not sure what the Green Gateway on Leary Way at the south end of downtown is on the map. Like if it has a different, more specific name? Like, is it a named park? Is it a bunch of them?
I can answer that. This is Glenn.
Amazing.
That's the what we also call the town center open space. It's where the bridge at Larry Way crosses over. There's also the Heron Rookery, that park. That's like kind of a green space as you enter the city from the end of 520 or whatnot. That's
Maybe we could just
I think the
name.
names might have changed or how that's been defined over the years.
Yeah, it would be great if it was just like very specific parks, even if there are a bunch of them that people can look up and know that that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, because, so, you know where Leary Way is, right? And where RTC is, and where Bear Creek Parkway comes in, and you come across, and where 520, there's a bridge, and then there's all that green area, sort of, that's where it is.
Yeah.
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
And I would love that as well, so then we're protecting it and not leaving an open door to where if some of it
Right.
is not protected and goes to the wayside, that somebody can't say, well, there's still a green space there. So that we're doing what we need to protect it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree.
It's not defined, then it's, what is it? So,
Fair game.
All
And
right.
even there's that little park, it's named on some maps and not on others, so I'm not sure if it actually has a name. But the one that's across 159th from the Heron Rookery, it has like, it's just this little like nub off the Sammamish River Trail. But it has some art, and there's like a shelter that was made as a classroom. So it's just this nice little space, but it has a lot of like interpretive signs. I don't even know if it actually has a name. I would assume that's included in this.
Yeah, we can look.
all
I can
shrugging.
see if we can, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if there was a reason it was left vague or not, but we could certainly make it a little more specific.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
All right, now we're moving on to another section, town center. I think you're familiar with this area. Is there any comments on DT 31?
so Commissioner Weston.
So I was really sorry to see the farmer's market not included in this. The Saturday market did not make it into the rewrite.
Okay, we can potentially add it back in.
So that was my first comment. And then my second comment on this one specifically is I would really like to see specifically called out the connections with light rail and other transit. I know we have the transit center nearby, but like the town center is sort of a thing unto itself, and it's not really connected into the rest of the transit system.
And light rail is going to
And
be
then
stopped
light rail's
right
going to be
there.
right there. So it just to me that feels like a gap.
Or like connections with transit other than light rail.
Yeah, I want
Or
both
in
the
addition
light
to light
rail
rail.
and non-light rail transit called out in this policy, because otherwise people can't get where they're going.
I mean,
Okay.
light rail stop is going to be right there, and buses will be coming to serve the light rail station.
But usually on the other side, not necessarily. Like right now, no buses go into Redmond Town Center.
Right, but they'll be going right to the edge of Redmond Town Center.
Some of them do, but a lot of them are actually several blocks away on the other side.
But I'm saying, once the light rail station goes there, there will be buses that will be servicing the light rail station.
Right. Well, that's what I'm hoping. I just wanted to see it actually reflected in the policy also.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay.
May I just add something to that policy or point out the last bullet, the 44 acres? That also is a reference to the policy we had talked about earlier, the kind of gateway entrance that includes some of that 44 acres. And we're maintaining that as like permanent open space, so.
Thanks, Glenn.
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
For our new, on page 19, it's a new policy just under DT 31.
Yes.
Allow additional height when accompanied by
Yep.
exceptional. I had a question of, two questions. One, what is exceptional? Like, is it in the true definition of more like having an exception, like being, or is it relative? And then that advance business diversity, housing, or environmental sustainability goods, is that, or is it an exclusive or is it an and or?
Lauren, can I speak to that? If you don't
Yeah,
mind?
I was about to, yeah, no, I'm okay with that.
So Commissioner Angela, I'm not sure if you were on commission at the time, but this is actually related to the recent town center zoning code amendment. So this is kind of a policy that sets up the incentive package. So in terms of how we actually define exceptional public amenities, it's kind of a generalized concept that is kind of determined kind of on a project-by-project basis. I believe there is some kind of guidance in the zoning code of what that means, but generally speaking, we kind of define that in the zoning code. So for the town center incentives, what we define is exceptional public facility amenities. Could include, but it's not limited to, say, plazas, additional parks, green spaces, things like that. But as we kind of had a lot of discussion, a lot of that comes out in the development agreement and master plan agreement and kind of things like that. So as new development occurs, it's kind of a mix of staff, council, directors that kind of try to determine, are these public amenities offered, say, in a master plan, exceptional enough to allow certain incentives.
Okay.
So it is kind of generalized, but it allows that flexibility for people, for like developers to develop their projects and have kind of opportunities to offer different things in terms for the incentives, so.
I think that's saying a whole lot for one word. That gives a lot of leeway, and maybe that was the spirit that we wanted to do that in. I don't know if that we should have a footnote in there. So then, somebody on down the line says, well, this is what's exceptional, or this is what exceptional means to me. So we've got something to reference that back to.
I would also note that I think the narrative that accompanies this, which is not here, kind of gets into that a little bit too.
Okay.
Kind of gives a better example or definitional kind of discussion of kind of what that means. So sometimes a little bit of the context gets lost because the narrative isn't here yet that accompanies these sections.
Yeah.
Commissioner West?
Yeah, so I totally agree with this. I wonder if we could, if there is all that narrative, maybe we could say something like exceptional defined amenities, or something that implies that there is a lot more behind that. Because I do agree, I don't like, anytime you get into policies where they're not specific, then I get worried that they could either be used overly broadly or incorrectly.
And then I still have the question of the exclusive or is it inclusive? Is it an and or?
It's not an exclusive or.
Subject to interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be subject to interpretation. And again, if you look at the incentive table that accompanies this in the zoning code,
Yeah.
it gives you multiple options
Yeah.
for additional heights. So for example, you can do a mix of something that helps with business diversity or housing and environmental sustainability goals. And if
Yeah.
this commission had seen here, we have kind of a different mix of options for that, so.
Can we add and/or then? Because otherwise, as it reads right now, it's
believe
exclusive.
there was a
It's
question
saying
because
or.
and would imply all three would have to be provided, and that provides.
That's why I said and/or.
Yeah, and that becomes an issue in the zoning code
Or
because
is-
you do have a mix of
Or
options.
is and or, unless unless exclusivity is
Okay.
noted. I mean, by default, or is and or.
It's sort of, this policy is vague because the specificity is existing already in the zoning code.
Yeah,
I think is what the issue is, yeah.
so, yeah, this is the policy that was just recently approved.
One I just missed.
Yeah,
And
I
in
think
the
by a
zoning code
meeting,
that was
yeah.
approved
Couple
along
months
with
late.
this, there was a whole table of defining what the incentives were, what the exceptional amenities were.
Okay.
And I think that from my recollection, and Glenn, you can probably speak to this a lot closely, the table has those three categories: business diversity, housing, environmental sustainability goals. So this policy sort of references that table.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question, Chair, on
Yes,
that.
sure.
So I think this reads differently from what potentially might be the incentive package at Overlake, where you have, you know, maybe inclusive design and a whole bunch of other really new things. So maybe it should be reflective a little more of a more open-ended thing where allow additional height when accompanied by items referenced in the agreed upon incentive package or something like that, which could be, and then leave it open-ended. Because this relates to an incentive package which might change in the future. Right? So we are shutting the door on potential incentive, potential items added to that, that point system, which could be Overlake, which might come to downtown. I don't know. Right? So I feel that business, they're all worthy. I'm just saying that maybe there might be more which we don't want to discount.
That is a
Well,
good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, I will point, this policy is for town center, right?
Right.
Not for all of downtown. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
But this might be something that down the line, if we change, we could
Yes.
change it, right?
Absolutely.
So rather
So we
than
don't want
We
it to
have a whole
be
procedure
just
for
these
changing
three.
things.
Right. So I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I think these three are great, but what if there's something else we want to tack on later? Then this kind of prohibits us tacking on some stuff to the incentive package in the future.
No, we just would have to change the policy. I mean, this
should just be
policy
that extra
was,
step.
this policy was changed in the current comp plan through
Right.
the comp plan amendment process.
Right.
So if we want to change the incentive package for town center in the future, we would go through that same process,
Okay.
where we would
Okay.
amend the comp plan and change the zoning
And I
code.
would also note that this is written to provide that flexibility. So if we wanted to, say, improve or make some changes to the incentive package, say, different types of incentives or, say, different heights, things like that, we wouldn't actually have to go through a comp plan amendment. Because this was kind of the issue with Town Center, is that we needed to kind of modify this policy slightly in order to do the incentive package, because there wasn't enough clarity for the incentive package. So
Right.
this policy was written to provide more clarity, but also flexibility. So, as we come up with, say, better environmental sustainability kind of incentives, or our housing kind of incentives kind of change, we actually don't have to amend the whole comp plan. We could just say, make a minor change to the zoning code itself.
And it was also done to allow a project that had been delayed multiple times already to get started without having to wait to the end of the Redmond 2050 process. So, but this is,
But that still means, like, from what I understand from Becky's message, saying that we might revisit this once the incentive package is a little more,
yep,
let's say,
absolutely.
mature.
Yep,
So,
but I just wanted everyone to realize this is a town center policy.
right.
And the other package we've been working on has been Overlake, and it just apply,
Right.
Not necessarily shutting out anything else by doing this. And we're not finished with this. This is our first draft.
Very true. Is there anything else we want to talk about on the new policy or GT 33?
Nope. I'm happy with DT 33.
All right. Moving on to Downtown Edge.
Okay.
Anything else? Anything on DT 34?
Nope.
We've got new policy just dealing with kind of overall building, kind of generic building heights, low-rise buildings in the edge zone.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've deleted and moved some things from here. Moving to citywide, DT 36 is moving to the citywide community design standards. DT 37 was moved to more general policies of downtown. And a lot of this zone was sort of moved around. The mixed use residential office zone was moved around into those three other categories.
Mm-hmm.
As was the Sammamish Trail policies. So the policies in the section aren't being deleted, but the section is being deleted, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Right.
This was deleted because it was duplicative. This was moved, deleted.
Mm-hmm.
Moved to downtown core section. And then this is for downtown edge continued here.
Commissioner Weston.
So once we get to D49, I was curious. I really think I like the intent of this policy. I wasn't sure what being consistent with residential buildings means exactly in terms of uses on the ground floor.
That is a good question.
Like, I couldn't come up with counterexamples, so maybe just a little specificity on that one. And if we're actively forbidding something, then it would be good to know. Like, are we forbidding offices that have one entrance and take up an entire block? Are we preferring, not bars? I can't imagine that's it. Anyways, I couldn't come up with, what exactly this meant.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It looks like it may have been a holdover from the last.
Yeah, looks like.
The initial policy, and I don't know what we necessarily meant in there either.
Right.
That's maybe something we can review and address.
Yeah.
And the following D50 also says, allow commercial uses provided that non-residential uses meet all other criteria specified in the policy above. So I think 50 also references that same set of things in 49, but I don't know what either of them mean.
Yeah. I'll take a closer look at it. Because I think it's sort of meant, yeah.
And for all I know, these two could be blended together. I'm not totally sure.
Because I think it's some of the policies from D49 may have not come over here to the new one. Kind of just to make sure uses don't conflict.
Right. But what are the conflicts that we're trying to avoid?
Yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. It's something that needs to get taken a closer look at.
Thank you.
Yeah. DT 51.
Do you have something on 51? Okay. Nothing.
Okay. 52. Kind of combine those into.
Commissioner Aparna, did you have something?
On 53, yes.
Yeah, I think we all have something on 53.
Yeah.
I think personally, it's a little too prescriptive
Yep.
for a policy. Like it gets into, this is what it needs to look like, and an aesthetic that might change. You
Mhm.
Well,
I think
I
having,
I
I
agree
don't know,
that,
I thought it was a little too prescriptive. I don't know if anybody
well, I
else
think it belongs
agrees.
in the design chapter anyway, not
Yeah.
here. And I hate policies that talk about features typically found in single-family neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
I'm on a search and destroy mission to eliminate all references to single-family neighborhoods in this comp plan.
I completely agree with that, Sherry. So yeah, I think I think you articulated it better than I could, but yes, thank
And
you.
I mean, I know this also maybe this goes in the narrative too, but defining where this sub area is.
Yeah,
Because I mean, I know personally, I was like, what, where? Like, I had to look.
yeah, I don't know where it is. I don't know where it is. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know why. It makes no
That's by
sense.
the old Redmond High School.
No,
Old Redmond High School,
it's
those
where
kind
the
of streets.
there's like a spring that used to be there.
Okay,
Is old Redmond history.
yeah. So you had
I
something?
mean, is this something we just want to, I mean, we want to maybe move some of this to the design chapter, but do you think it still belongs in the downtown chapter?
No.
No, I don't think so.
Like at all? Like any reference to the plat sub area?
No,
Unless we need to keep it in there for a reason.
I don't see any reason to keep it in there.
And
I don't see why that little sub area needs to be any different than any place else in downtown.
right.
Is there any reason it needs to be singled out specially in downtown?
We'd have to check, but I believe that area's been really redeveloped significantly since this last update. I think the intention was that it was kind of a historical neighborhood with a lot of old, older craftsman homes and stuff, but unfortunately, I believe over the last 10 years that most of that area has been redeveloped. I've just been looking at the aerial, and
So is there, I mean,
yeah, I don't
is
think
there
there's
any
even any
desire
remaining
to-
homes.
to preserve this,
That's something we'll have to look at
Plat.
closely, but my top level is that I don't think it necessarily, yeah.
My understanding is anything that we'd want to preserve is actually called out in the very small list of historical buildings.
right?
And we can leave it there. I did have one thing I specifically do not want carried over to the design chapter if any of this makes its way over. And that's chimneys. I don't think mandating chimneys is a thing that we want to be doing in 2023.
No. That's right.
Where is that?
It's the very
Am I-
first bullet. Emphasize
am I missing
features
it?
typically found in single-family
Oh,
neighborhoods,
including pitched-
including pitched or mansard roofs, front doors, porches or stoops, chimneys, and house-like windows.
Let's encourage the consumption of fossil
Oh, it's right
fuels.
here.
Right.
I see
So
it.
I would like to nix the chimneys, please.
Let's encourage pollution. Let's burn stuff. Let's, yeah, lose it. Yeah. As long as it's charming, it doesn't really pollute the air.
I don't even know if this is probably too much if we brought this over to design
Chimneys,
to
yeah.
actually double check that we're not requiring chimneys other places, but
Yeah.
it just jumped out at me.
I'm just going to change this to remove chimneys reference. So we're not removing everyone's chimneys in the city of Redmond. But what will the chimney sweeps do? I'm just thinking of Mary Poppins right now. I'm sorry.
That's right. Dick Van
There's
Dyke.
still a few left,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. It's like where will Dick Van Dyke tap dance on roofs? Anyway, so D54. Deleting it no longer necessary. And are we at the end? That's the end.
Well, okay, so if D54 is no longer necessary, then why is D53 in there?
That was a great question.
I mean, if we no longer want to retain and enhance 165th Avenue Northeast and Paragos Plaza as a unique and very pleasant place to live, blah, 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 then why do we have the design development standards for that area?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I think we're considering components of this to community design chapter next draft. Yeah.
so,
I also think the design elements themselves, they're quite questionable.
yep.
Mansard roofs and things are, I mean, it's nice for a certain type of aesthetic, but it doesn't go with all the rest of the stuff we're trying to do. I think we should give enough options and not outlaw mansard roofs, but we can't put it in anywhere explicitly.
Yeah, if we're not going to have DT 54, then DT 53 should just
Yeah,
disappear.
I agree.
All right. I think maybe we left it in so we could have this conversation.
Okay. Poof, gone.
All right.
Quick,
All right.
just clarification. So we're talking about the streetscape. I just want to make sure that we're talking about that I'm clear of where we're talking about on 165th. Are we talking about in between 83rd and 80th on 165th?
Yeah, I was just confirming what Paragos Plat is. It's the first residential neighborhood in Redmond, but yeah, it's centered around 165th between 80th and 85th, like those blocks right there.
I think that's really interesting because that's actually my neighborhood. And I'm thinking about like, okay, well, what historical buildings or what quaintness is there left to preserve? I mean, we've got,
I don't see much on the aerial, so.
yeah, I mean, there's the one building that was up for sale on the corner of 165th and 83rd. That was a counseling office was using it prior, not sure what's going to go in there now. One corner is the Luke. Behind that, headed south, is a row of townhomes. On the other side of that is commercial use.
Don't you want to preserve the 7-Eleven?
Yeah.
And all the parking.
Yeah, and there is an older home on 165th, but my understanding there is a what do you call, short plat, that's going to build 7 townhomes.
Correct, because they're looking to move that house. So instead of selling the house, they're now looking to, so the property, from my understanding, is that it's sold, and now they are looking to move that house. And that the house itself is for sale. Besides that residence, the rest of that is already all commercial use. Yep. And there's a couple of residences on 166th, same block, but on the back side of it. However, I don't think that they are of any historical significance whatsoever. And the church, of course, does have historical significance, but that's it. Yeah, I don't see why we need it in here.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Anything else before we start community design?
No, I think that's
All
it.
right. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate your time. And I will see you next time.
Great.
I'll turn it over to Becky for community design.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Before we dive into the policies themselves, I just want to share an update that we've done for our website. So when you go to our main Redmond 2050 website, the community character and design conversation is the first thing you see here on the left. There's information just about the outreach that we're going to be doing through the end of this year, including information about the community dinner activity and discussion that the Together Center will be hosting, that we're being co-sponsoring with Eastside for All and a whole bunch of community organizations. The other thing that I have done is we have beefed up the community character and historic preservation page to expand it to talk about this whole new chapter, and how we're moving into an equity conversation, including a lot of information about what we're doing, and links to all of the community conversations that have been happening for the last couple of years. And then up here near the top, there's a link to a brand new page that I put together that I'll be adding things to as we go. But a lot of those resources that people were interested in that were in a slide deck, we've put now on the website so that people can access them easier. And again, I'll be adding more too, but if there's anything in particular that you'd like to see added onto this, we're not necessarily recommending any of these resources, but we're providing them as a way for people to dive deeper into the conversation and learn more about how you can think about how we build our community in a way that's more inclusive. So I just wanted to point that out and make sure you're aware of this new resources that we have and the event on the 26th. If a commissioner or a couple of commissioners would like to attend this event, please let us know, because we would want to avoid a quorum, but just contact Lauren or I, and we could make sure that we're RSVP'd on your behalf. And then we are also putting together another event on this November 16th that we're going to be coordinating with the Northwest Universal Design Council, potentially a couple of other folks, and to have a conversation between cities and industry experts who are working in the actual design and construction and the implementation of accessibility and inclusive design, and just having a good chance to have a conversation about what cities are wanting to do, trying to do, some examples that we're working forward, and then what from the industry and perspective, what challenges they're facing that the city might be able to make changes to help. So those are some things that we're going to be moving forward with. So just wanted to share that real quick before we dive into the actual policy piece. There's a lot of resources out there.
Great.
Now let me share the policies themselves. Okay. Let me zoom in a little bit. I want to set the stage a little bit here so we understand that there's work that is still underway on consolidating and moving some things around here. So while the intention is here, and we're not going to be making a lot of changes to adding a whole new concept, but there might still be some things that are merged and moved around, and the organizational structure of it might modify. And so the actual policies in the end, you might see some changes because of that merging. Including some additional things that are moving out of land use and over into here too. So, and we just talked in the downtown, there's some things that are moving over here as well. We're also still looking at a couple of these that might, are they specific for a particular center, or should they still be considered as a citywide, and just how that all plays together. And then how, as we start to merge this all into one giant chapter, how then do we make all of the centers work that we just did, make it work for everything? And we've already identified there's a couple of things actually in the centers that we might want to use as a modifier for some of the things you see today. So just keep that in mind. There's some additional work that will happen. It's still relatively complete. Like I said, there's not like a whole lot that we think that we're missing at this point in time, but that is one of the things that we're trying to get out of our community engagement that will happen over the next couple of months. Those community conversations that will be happening will be, are we missing something? What do we don't know that we don't know, and making sure that we're catching everything that the community has a prioritization of. But since we have been having these conversations since late 2020, we do feel it is substantially complete from a conceptual standpoint. But just have grace on us tonight from a wording perspective and from a duplication perspective, because we do know that there are some issues still that we're trying to resolve. But we'll just start with the top here. One of the things that's going to be in this new category are just some setting the stages for corridors. It's not in the design section, but we put it in this document just to have it out there to get it moving. So just for now, just note that we are going to be having these two new policies that are going to be setting the stage for work that will happen after Redmond 2050 is completed. So we have identified the fact that we have a preferred alternative that says centers and corridors is a pattern of growth that we like. And so we need to take a look at some corridor planning processes, in particular in Southeast Redmond, but we've also identified not just that Southeast Redmond in Redmond Way corridor, but Avondale and Willows Road and potentially elsewhere. So these two policies are new and they just set the stage for that future work. Are there any questions on this?
Commissioner Aparna.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, Chair. So I just have a question. The second one, encourage the creation of complete neighborhoods. For me, I see the corridors kind of either bridging two different types of characters of of neighborhoods on each side of the corridor, or trying to span and build a whole bigger picture. So for me, I see the words which are missing is holistic design, which are basically urban design principles. At the higher level, you want some kind of cohesion. So if the corridors are going to be that bridge between two different things, they would mean certain things. And if they are going to pull two things together, it would mean a different kind of design. I don't know if that's making sense, but I feel we should add somewhere cohesion and an urban picture. Or does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Got it.
Anybody else?
That does.
Okay.
So we are creating a new category for inclusive design, but we did have some policies that worked in that direction. And so we've just captured this under a new header. I do think that what we may end up doing with some of these is creating a new framework policy that is at that higher level, and then some of these will just fall underneath it, and that'll allow us to kind of clean up the structure. But we are just going to be deleting that very first one that is in the existing community character preservation chapter, removing the vision related to the size and character while balancing. This really is covered in a number of different ways, but also trying to move away from policy language that is not supportive of the fact that we have to accommodate growth. And so we want to make sure that the language we're using is supportive of meeting our GMA requirements. And so policies like this just can be replaced by other policies that are more in line with our vision.
Yep.
All right, so the new inclusive design section, just at the very top, we just adopt standards that address the needs of all people, regardless of age and ability. So it's just a high level one. We might take this one up into a framework policy and expand it a little bit. But any thoughts on this one or the next one, which actually just adopts the universal design principles? These are well known. We didn't create this list. We're just adopting it.
Commissioner Weston.
So for this one, and then actually the new policy that's after CC2, there's a whole list of additional like groups that deserve additional protection. And I would actually like to see that the list of extra bullets. So it was under consider how design can impact the feeling of safety, inclusion, and independence for community members, and then spelled out different types. Because what I'm seeing is like, I think that age and ability are two examples of protected classes, but even if you just look under like the Washington State definition, there are a lot more than that. So like, we're definitely talking gender, we're talking like marital status, like there's a whole religion, there's a whole list. And so I think just having a single, more comprehensive statement at the beginning will feel smoother, and then also gets out of things that I really noticed in that second bullet, like calling out specifically children and teens, but not elderly people. Calling out women and girls as a protected class, like, but not any of the other gender or sex options that could feel unsafe. This list felt too specific in some places and totally missing other pieces. So if it could all just be kind of workshopped into one overarching piece that used more standard language, I think that would be better.
Yeah, I think CC2, a lot of that needs to go up into.
And it's not even, CC2 is deleted. There's an unnumbered policy underneath it.
Right, yeah.
And that all needs to come up, I think, but also be reworked just so that because it felt like it was preferring some classes, like some groups, some subgroups.
I agree.
Over others, and I just felt icky about it.
Yeah, I think the first policy and this policy can be combined. They're really saying the same thing. So adopt and review.
They are.
Yeah.
Because it's important. We want it there. And I think at the top is great.
Yeah.
And then just a little bit more standardized language on like what we're actually talking about protecting.
Or maybe the second policy about what we're adopting design standards that incorporate universal design principles goes first.
Yeah.
And then next goes the combination of the other two.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I do think like the safety piece is important. The independence piece is enormous. Inclusion is huge. So these are all important things to be capturing, but just maybe up top and maybe just in one spot. So we've said it once, we mean it, and then we don't have to repeat it later.
Nope, I like it. Good. Okay,
Sure.
that does actually bring us back to HO 27. This was moved over from the housing element, but it's specifically to senior housing. Do we feel that if we call these out and they're combined in such a way that it is very clear that we're talking about meeting the needs of all ages, do we need this policy, or do we want to somehow have a more generic, housing policy for all ages and abilities are actually already in the housing element?
Go ahead.
All right, I have a strong opinion about this one. Having lived on a street where we've lost almost all the original owners, and it really, because they could no longer afford to live in the homes they were in, or because their homes were no longer suited for their needs. So they had to leave and mostly move out of state. I think that this is such a specific and real problem that Redmond is facing that it deserves its own policy about this very real group and the needs that they have.
Yeah, my only concern is, and I'm in this, when you preference keeping seniors in their homes, then you don't create the space for new younger families to move into those homes.
So I read it differently.
Yeah,
I read it as
doesn't, it
you're
says
keeping the seniors in their neighborhoods
Neighborhood.
because you have housing options that work
Right.
at different stages of life.
Yeah,
And so actually you could just create housing options for different stages of life, including
Yeah.
specifically call out seniors
Yeah.
who are moving out of single family homes.
that's what I would like to see explicit.
Yes.
Because if it's not explicit that that you're encouraging that development of housing in their own neighborhoods, then you're talking about keeping them in their houses, and I think
Exactly.
Got
that's
it.
problematic.
Yep, completely.
Okay, that I can work with.
Okay,
So yeah, let me reword that. That is very helpful. And we can incorporate, we
Okay.
can incorporate a couple of other concepts in that too. Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
wait, we have Commissioner Woodyer and then Commissioner Parna.
I was going to
Got
say,
it.
if you're going to reference seniors, you may also want to reference abilities because people do get displaced due to acquired disabilities.
Yeah,
And that would be in line with our policy around equity and inclusion.
Commissioner Parna.
Thank you, Chair. So I think personally for me, having it like the words that stick out for me are aging in place and multi-generational households or neighborhoods. So what that means is people are not displaced as circumstances change. Young, old, everybody gets, but people are not displaced. And I think that is what I would seek from something like this, because that accessible universal design means it's designed for all. So that's what I would seek in that whole thing. And as to the other one about independence for community members, I know everybody discussed this, but I feel that this one is actually, it borders on exclusionary, right? So we want to focus on the safety part. Inclusion and safety are the words that pop out to me for that one. Thank you.
Commissioner Nueva Camino.
I'm coming back to I'm so sorry, I just blipped. Provides seniors the opportunity to remain in their own neighborhoods as their housing needs change. Just bringing up the point that I recall that we had talked about, I'm paraphrasing, but diverse inventory of our housing. And I don't know if this is going to then be redundant somewhere else, but just making a note of it because we've got so many moving parts right now. That's it.
Yeah, I can definitely go back and double check the wording of that and make sure that we're not duplicating. This policy could be much more focused on ensuring that we are moving towards new construction, incorporating those visitability and universal design features so that our housing stock is more resilient and can meet the needs of people as they acquire disabilities or as they age, requiring, the type of thing that makes it less expensive to convert a normal house into something that can support somebody who has additional needs. It's just ensuring our housing stock is built to the standards in the first place.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we can focus this policy more along those lines.
Yeah, because I do believe that it definitely needs its own call out, but I just don't want it to morph into something that we already have somewhere else so that it stands alone on its own. Yeah.
No,
Great.
That's great. Really good feedback. Thank you. Okay. So there's probably a few other things that might pop as we go through this actually a very specific conversation over the next several months, especially with universal design. So we might revisit this chapter and we may add something if something new pops up. But this is something where we're really trying to reach out to the experts, the folks who are doing the designing of the buildings and the architects and the engineers and the the folks who are making modifications to houses for people who need them, and identifying the specific areas where they need change in order to meet community needs. That may generate some things. So just calling that out here. Okay. So there's some work that we still potentially have to do here on the building and site design. There's just a couple of existing policies that we've are keeping, but they're modifying the language a little bit. Any thoughts or comments on CC 9 or 14?
Don't see any.
Again, there's some things that we have specifically called out in the center's element that might be able to streamline this a little bit better. I think we worked on the language there a lot. Okay, so CC 15, this was really just trying to fold in that complete neighborhoods work in there and being a little less specific about, you know, we're not calling out schools and religious facilities and libraries, but actually just talking about the broader public and semi-public uses that contribute to a neighborhood being a complete neighborhood and that sense of place. So this is a rewording, but it still has the same intent.
Commissioner Weston.
So for this one, I actually think deleting the specific things of schools, religious facilities, and libraries is a mistake because I think it's way less readable. Like if I read schools, religious facilities, libraries, and other public or semi-public buildings, that means something specific to me. And if I just read public or semi-public libraries, my brain, like my eyes kind of glide over it, and I don't know what you're talking about. So for me, the old version actually really said something specific, and the new version is harder to parse.
Okay. That's valid.
Oh, sorry, one other thing on that. I really like also including the schools and libraries specifically, because I think that both of those are run by organizations that are not Redmond. So one is run by the school district, one is run by King County. So it implies cooperation between Redmond and these other like government organizations. And I think that's really important to keep in there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next one is just, oh, anybody?
Commissioner
Is there
Farmer?
somebody else?
This is for CC 17, actually. So,
Okay.
Anybody,
Let's do 16 real quick and then we can get to 17.
anybody have
Okay.
anything on 16?
no,
I don't think anybody has anything on 16.
Yeah, we're just not
Billboards
going to
are
allow
bad.
billboards still. Yeah.
Do you?
I was just going to ask earlier, how are we defining large signs? Do we have like a definition? Sorry. How are we defining, for CC 16, how are we defining large signs? Like I have a good sense of what a billboard is, but the large sign is very subjective in my mind.
That is a good question. Let me talk to our permit text that process the signs.
I can add to that. It's defined in the Redmond Municipal Code. I'm not sure specifically, but the reason why we use large signs, because it can be, there's flexibility in defining what large signs are, but we do have sign codes.
There's a sign ordinance. Okay,
Thank you.
there you go. It's in the municipal code.
There we go.
Okay,
We'll go have.
all right.
All right, so CC 17 design review, it's existing.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Parna.
so I think for me, I think it's fine, but I think we should say that it should be an easy to use or a smooth process of design review. the idea is that the design review is a good idea, but let the process not be a burden, right? So implement a system through a formal design review board process, formal and easy to use design review process or something like that, where we cut down on the overheads and streamline the process over time. We've heard from the community that sometimes this is very onerous. Maybe at some point we would look at that, right? So,
That is a part of the code updates that we're working on right now.
right.
So just to preview some of the code work, and I think we've talked about this before,
Yeah.
is that we're not only looking at the process for design review just in general, we're looking at what needs to go to the design review board and what we could potentially move away from them and not have to have them review, but also then making some of the things that do go to the design review board, making it more clear what they're looking at and giving them a little bit more teeth where they don't have teeth, but then also providing just some clarity so everybody goes into that process knowing what could potentially come out of it. And then we're also moving away from very prescriptive design policies and more outcome-based policies.
Thank you, Becky. That's wonderful. So I think whatever you said, a little bit of that spirit should creep into this policy because then it shows the spirit of what we're trying to do, right?
I also note that this isn't really an existing policy. It's been modified
Right.
because it says maintain a system of design review based on objective standards,
There we go.
which was not in the original policy. So I don't know what the objective standards are, but
I think that was, they were trying to do the fact that we're based on outcomes.
yeah, so.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Lots of hands in these edits. Okay, any other thoughts on CC17?
It sounds like these are attempting to be some of the standards, but are they the standards that we want?
It's 18. So the other thing to keep in mind too is that this policy is one of the foundational policies for the general design guidelines, and what would end up being reviewed at the design review board. So if there's anything in here that you would like to change or see different or be added, this is the policy that we would want there. So these are the outcomes that we want to see, right?
Right. I'm just saying it reads really differently than what we're talking about everywhere else.
Yeah.
Because it's the existing language from the existing code. So, it's concerned about different things.
That's a really good point.
So.
Okay. Let me get together with Kim. She's leading the design standards updates too. Let me see if we can re-eyeball this particular policy and rework it, because I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
I think in some sense
there's no reference to inclusive, universal design here. There's things like minimize negative impacts such as glare or unsightly views of parking. Well, we're trying to move away from parking, so we don't necessarily want to minimize unsightly views of parking. We want to think about parking completely differently.
So I I think one of the reasons why there was some hesitation to edit this one right now is that one of the things that we need to do for every code we have in place,
Right.
there has to be a tie and a foundation.
Sure.
And so I think what they were trying to do is like, okay, do we have a line in the code on this topic? Well, let's have a bullet point over here. I don't think we have to keep that level of specificity. We can, I mean, we're raising up to a higher level on everything else. I think we can do the same thing here too.
Commissioner Parna.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Chair, that it's reading very, like, it reads completely different. So, like, for instance, I would say promote environmental friendly design and building techniques. Lower impact development is probably the better way to go. And then like universal design should be there, or inclusive design should make the cut, right? So all the themes are missing, right? Equity, inclusion, sustainability, those themes need to be in design terms over here, which we are not seeing. Does that make sense?
Oh, yep, I hear you.
So this is a cool place to put really cool stuff, but it's not there yet. Sorry.
No. Hey, it's the first cut.
Well, I mean, yeah,
Right.
this policy seems to be laying out what the DRB should use to determine how things should pass, and it just doesn't fit.
And words like design, proportion, rhythm, massing,
Yeah.
these are very good, very detailed design concepts, but they don't really talk about cohesion with the neighboring thing. So we're going to have people doing a Grecian temple saying it's perfect proportion, but it's going to stand out like a sore thumb, right? So we're just going to have to talk about it in the context of all the other fabric that we're building. So
I hear you. We will rework this.
Okay. Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Becky, just on a technicality, one that Chair had mentioned earlier in a different area, we've got existing, and even if we kept it as is, it's not a clear cut copy paste because we did take out on promote environmentally friendly design and building techniques. We did take out such as lead for the construction and yada yada. So just needing to update from existing to updated. And of course, all of the reworking that's going to come later.
Yeah. But when we get to the rework, we'll call out the specific edit and purpose of the edit. Yeah. No, that's good. Thank you for calling that out.
CC20 is also not existing because you got rid of and attractive design.
Yes, wherever it said attractive design, we did remove that.
Good. I'm in favor of that.
It was. We have a lot of people that can interpret that differently. So.
But let's keep track of the fact that we did.
Yeah.
Anybody have Commissioner Parna?
I don't know what high quality means.
Same issue. Yeah.
Yep.
So, like in my mind, high quality is durable and pleasing, but it may not be everybody's definition. So a little bit of clarity on that as to which direction we are going. Is it aesthetic or is it something more material? I don't know.
High quality to me means it has great internet connectivity. And plenty of plugs.
I believe that in the downtown document, high quality was in there, but then there were callouts as far as what the high quality materials were. But then it was high quality materials.
Yeah. Anything else on CC20?
think we actually have a call out in Overlake as well. High quality and durable materials.
Yes.
I'll just make sure that we can touch that up a little bit. Okay. So at CC21, we were asked to remove the specific reference to CPTED, the community planning through environmental design, or no, excuse me, crime prevention through environmental design. And actually just keep it a higher level. There's some positive connotations of that particular reference and some negative connotations. So we were asked to just bring that up to a higher level, and so it was just streamlined a little bit. Any thoughts or comments on CC21?
Commissioner Weston?
So I don't know if this would come up here, but it made me wonder a little bit about the use of cameras. So there's provide opportunities for residents and workers to view spaces and observe activities nearby, which feels safe in person. But if that's being like outsourced to a camera that's just on recording, do we have any policy about that?
I don't believe so.
Should we? Because I have, personally, I'll just like put my opinion out there. I have a very strong opinion about not having just a camera network around Redmond as a default, with the explanation that people think it makes them safer.
Yep.
So I just want to make sure that we're not, or that if we're talking about safety and built environment, that we're sort of explicit about the expectations around that.
Yeah. I am the same.
Let me go back to a couple of different folks. I know our public works team and our TIS team might actually have some thoughts on that. We do have like the intelligent transportation system uses cameras, right? So we'd have to be sure that if we do have a camera related policy, it doesn't interfere with things that are how we actually manage our infrastructure systems.
For sure, but that's different than security cameras. So when we're talking about safety and security, and cameras in open spaces or public spaces, I'd love to see that specifically spelled out here, that it's a non-goal, if possible.
Yeah. Commission, we've been working on this for a while. We still have 2 more things on the agenda tonight. We're not going to finish this tonight, Becky.
Yeah, we've got a ways to go before we get to a natural break too. So if you'd like, we can break here.
Yeah, I think this would be a good time to break. I propose that we go ahead and work and do annexation and regional planning, and then we'll take a 5-minute break before we do climate resiliency. Is that everybody okay with that? Okay, thanks, Becky, and
Thank you.
We'll come back and it's the first pass. Once we get past the first pass on these policies, it goes much faster. Okay, so now we'll move on to Redmond 2050 annexation and regional planning elements, second draft. And that is Audra.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. So, name is Audra Cárdenas. I'm a planner with long range planning, and pronouns are she, her. So, let me share my screen real quick. So, the annexation and regional planning element, you last saw this element back in April. And since then, now we've done the second draft where maps and graphs and narrative are included. So let's go over this a little bit. So just a little introduction. This element is We talk about how we're going to coordinate with other jurisdictions on major themes on planning, and also how we're going to annex territory that is beyond our city limits. So what are the policy drivers? Changes in state law. We have less potential annexation areas, and also we added some new policies based on the King County countywide policies, which are referred to orphaned roads and pre-annexation agreements. So what we heard from the first draft, there was some questions on where these orphaned roads are and what the definition. So we added a definition in the text and also an updated potential annexation area map. We also just received in July a notice of intent to annex one of our potential annexation areas, the 97th Street and Rose Hill. So we add a little bit of language in there, and if this annexation goes through, we'll have to update the map where we show the PAAs and also update the language. There was also some comments on updating and streamlining the policies. So we consolidated most of the policies from 20 to 15, and those 15 include the two new policies about orphan roads and annexation pre-agreements. And finally, you remember there was this robust discussion on some of the potential annexation areas, specifically English Hill. And there was a big discussion on it, but it didn't really change any specific policies. So just to show you, this is the new map with the orphan roads. And we still have 555 acres to with the potential to be annexed. If we get this annexation in the 97th, then the biggest one will be English Hill. And yeah, I'm here just to answer any questions that you have about this element, or if you want to discuss any of the topics on annexation and regional planning.
Commissioner Weston.
So I had a question about in that on page 4, you have maps of different annexations by decade.
Yep.
And in my area, which is sort of by Grasslawn, I've been seeing houses come on the market. There's a little area at the south end of 132nd, just on the corner of town by Kirkland, that looks like it was annexed in the 90s. I'm currently seeing houses come on the market and being sold with Kirkland addresses that are in that area. It's happened several times, and it caught my eye because it seemed weird after looking at these maps. And I was curious if if that's just an oddity and it's between the owners, or if there's something that these maps aren't capturing.
You mean which area? This Rose Hill area? Are you talking about? Because
yeah, if you go to, it's still there in the 1990 to 1999. It's further down, that one. Yep.
This one, yeah.
And then it's not there by the 2000 to 2009. But like if you go to mapping software, if you go, like these are showing up as Kirkland addresses on
our side
of 132nd.
Yeah, the address might stay as Kirkland, but they are actually in city limits. So the address sometimes stays as 98033, but the postage, but they're actually incorporated into Kirkland, into Redmond, sorry. Okay. So they are part of Redmond.
Address is set by the post office, but
yeah.
Oh,
you can be in city. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of these have the Kirkland address, but they are part of Redmond.
You can have an address in a different state from what you live in.
That's amazing. Okay.
Or I grew up near a state line, and there were people who lived in Tennessee but had a Kentucky mailing address.
Wow.
It was just the way it.
Thank you for answering this, because this is actually, it keeps popping up and it keeps being confusing. So thank you.
Yeah. People assume that the 98052 area code is the same as the Redmond city limits, and it's not quite true.
But if they're
more or less true, but not.
But then would it be Redmond 98033, or is it? No.
Kirkland.
They're at a Kirkland mailing address.
And yet
because
in
that
Redmond.
got assigned before they were annexed, and it just doesn't change. They don't change it.
Cool. Thank you.
The post office determines what zip code you're in.
Amazing.
Yeah. Any other questions for Commissioner Aparna?
I had just one question about Redmond Ridge. I know that it's the development agreement precludes it from joining the city and it's separate. Is that the term? Is it in perpetuity or does that term of that agreement end at some point? Is it?
It currently the way the law is written, there is no possibility that they incorporate or that they are annexed to Redmond because we get these potential annexation areas, which is the map that I showed you, and that is the only area that we can annex. It doesn't matter if the development agreement with Redmond Ridge, whatever happens to it, it doesn't matter to Redmond, the city of Redmond, because we don't have any possibility of annexing it. I don't think I'm not very familiar with the terms, but I don't think it expires for Redmond Ridge. But it doesn't really matter because we cannot annex at all.
Got it.
It would
Thank you.
require changing state law.
Yes.
Okay, you just
Which-
answered the question. Never mind.
Yeah. Anything else? Any questions on policies? Comments? Nope.
Don't see any.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we dig into the next topic. And so it's 8:56, and we'll start back up at 9:01. We'll now dig into Redmond 2050 Climate Resilience and Sustainability Policies First Draft Study Session. And Glenn Coyle will kick us off.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Glenn Coyle, Senior Planner with the City of Redmond in the Long Range Division, and I will be talking about the new proposed climate resilience and sustainability element. Also joining us tonight via Teams is Jenny Liebeck, our Environmental Sustainability Manager. And she'll, if you have any kind of questions or stuff related to kind of more our program and some of this in context, she'll be on that too. So thank you, Jenny, for joining us tonight. Just want to get that into full screen. Okay. So just wanted to, I know you've seen this graphic many times, but just wanted to reiterate again how this kind of all fits contextually. Comprehensive plan is the bigger long-term 30-year type vision for the city, and we have these numerous elements which have particular focuses but do have kind of a holistic approach. So, you know, some of the topics do cross over each other. You know, you might have seen that in the economic development or economic vitality element that has, you know, different subjects, but then, you know, it might touch upon, say, transportation, but we also have a specific transportation element. The same can be particularly true on this climate resilience element where we have a specific intention and kind of legal requirement that we're trying to meet with that, but at the same time, that doesn't preclude that all of our other elements and a lot of our other policies also speak towards climate resilience and greenhouse gas reductions. With that said, really how we implement that visionary documents gets into what we call our functional and strategic plans, and we have a lot of them also related to climate resilience, but it's also embedded in a lot of other plans. And I'll get into some more detail, but I just want to reiterate that. But then again, that has more of the implementation, the detailed strategies and things like that. And in turn, that really gets down into the kind of nitty gritty of kind of city operations, our capital facilities projects, our city programs, our zoning code, our municipal code, our building standards, things like that, where really a lot of this stuff gets implemented on the day-to-day stuff, and where you have exposure to a few of us in the planning department, but really this is the work of the 700 or 800 city employees that do this every day. So just shout out to them too. So when you see construction projects and folks working on stuff, there's a lot of work that that they're implementing that we see at the very high level, but they're doing on the day-to-day basis in the pouring rain and the cold weather and everything. So what are we currently doing? Redmond's actually a leader in this field in terms of communities working around climate change and greenhouse gas reduction. Our current comprehensive plan already has many policies. Well, we were very proactive when we did our last update 10 years ago. So a lot of the much more intentional type policies around climate resilience and greenhouse gas reduction were put in the utility and natural environment elements, even though they maybe weren't specific to that. It was just kind of a place where we could put them, but they were also scattered in a lot of our other elements, and then we're also updating. And so when we had noted here, there's over almost 300 policies you could say that are related to sustainability and resiliency. But in addition, our community strategic plan, which is actually being updated right now, council had a meeting on that yesterday. That has kind of specific direction related around city operations and how we want to address that. And the main document, I would say, is our Environmental Sustainability Action Plan. That's really our implementation that really gets into the detail of that. But in addition, we have our Climate Emergency Declaration that provides a lot of guidance on the work we do. And from the operations side that I kind of referenced, we have the City of Redmond Operations Zero Carbon Strategy that really gets into the nitty-gritty of how our staff and operations go every day. Tree Canopy Strategic Plan. Well, we have that document, and we also, have some tree canopy regulations that we're trying to implement. That's a little bit on hold, but that canopy strategy also supports a lot of this work. And then again, a lot of our other functional plans, the park plan that recently came through here, the water system plan, which is before us now, that a lot of the projects and kind of the thinking on that really has a sustainability and resilience goal. A wastewater plan, which was adopted a couple years ago. We have a stormwater plan that we're going to start developing. A new facilities plan, building facilities plan that we're going to be working on, I believe, next year. Again, a lot of that will have embedded in it a lot of these high-level policies that we see in the comp plan, and give that kind of more implementation aspect. So, so that gets to, what do we want to do then, if we're already doing all these things? Well, we want to develop a climate resilience element that first, prioritizes and supports our existing strategies to provide that long-term policy direction. So, I said a lot of our policies are kind of scattered throughout our comp plan, and we are doing a lot of the day-to-day action, but we really like to have that kind of umbrella, long-term kind of policy direction kind of in one location. So with that said, we also want to maintain and enhance our existing climate change and greenhouse gas reduction policies. We actually don't want to just delete them out of the comp plan or just come up with brand new ones for our climate element. We actually are in the process of analyzing the existing ones, and hey, maybe this will go to the climate element, and maybe this will just stay in other locations. And again, as I noted, this supports the actions identified and specifically in these documents, but of course everything else, the ESAP, operations, zero carbon strategy, et cetera. But really, with all that, really one of the more important things too is that HB 1181 passed this legislative session, had gone through our state legislator a few times over the last few years. It passed, and what essentially does is it revises RCW 36 blah 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 that you see there, which is our Growth Management Act. It amends that to make some changes to be more intentional about climate resiliency. So there's some changes to say updates that we have to do towards our land use element, our utilities around like green infrastructure, our parks, around open space. But the most pertinent thing related to this is that it requires a new climate resilience element, and they actually call it a climate resilience and greenhouse gas reduction element. So, as staff, as this passed and we've been updating our elements, we had been kind of discussing, do we just continue this to kind of keep these policies scattered throughout our comp plan, or do we get more intentional? But we know that it's an urgent thing in our community. We hear that constantly from community members. We hear that from staff. We hear that from council, from commissioners, et cetera. And also one of the challenges that the way the state law was written, the city of Redmond doesn't have to actually implement a climate resilient element until 2029, which is many years after our Redmond 2050 process, and almost gets closer to whatever the next comp plan update. So, noting that we already have many of these components, which a lot of communities don't. They don't have an environmental sustainability action plan. They haven't done climate vulnerability assessment. They haven't done a lot of this implementation work already, whereas we have. We just found that it makes sense to do this element. And, we heard what everyone said, and, we're going to move forward with that. So, when we talk about the proposed outline, one thing we do want to note, this wasn't something just randomly made up by staff. The requirement under the GMA talks about having a climate resilience element that focuses on resiliency, and that's in regards to, say, natural hazards related to climate change, right? So we have our kind of climate vulnerability assessment, and from that kind of helped inform, which hazards, really to speak to resiliency that we need to focus on. That doesn't preclude that we're not thinking about earthquakes and things like that. That's kind of a separate, this is the focus. So when we talk about extreme heat, wildfire, smoke, drought, extreme precipitation, all related to climate impacts, we're saying that these are high priority that we want to focus on, not precluding other things that also can be dealt with, say, in our natural environment element or, say, our hazard mitigation plan and things like that. So there's a reason why, that's the reason why we have the sub-element. The second sub-element that is required is policies around greenhouse gas reduction. And this is where you can see there's 4 categories here, and this is where we also trying to be intentional around also aligning with our ESAP, our Environmental Sustainability Action Plan. Sometimes the challenge is that we write these policies kind of at such a high level that there isn't really a good one-to-one match. But as we updated, folks remember the park plan and the new park element. We had worked together closely with the parks folks to really align our park element policies with the new park plan kind of goals and actions and everything. So this is the thing we also wanted to be intention that there is this kind of one-to-one, almost one-to-one relationship between the element and our implementation document, which is the ESAP. So. And this actually provided us a little bit more flexibility because, again, we actually had policies, say, in our utilities or natural environment element, but they really weren't the best place when we talk about, say, transportation or land use or some policies around buildings. So that, just because it wasn't a good fit. So this actually allowed us to look closer at ESAP and say, what's potentially missing in our comp plan that we could, add a couple of policies there. But a big chunk of the climate resilient element is existing policies that have been updated. So with all that said, so these are kind of the questions we want commissioners for you to think about. Are these policies generally headed in the right direction? Do they support Redmond's vision and goals? And with that said, does it provide support for our existing climate-related goals, strategies, and actions? And are there really any missing topics, priorities, or policy direction that we might have missed or maybe hasn't been emphasized? And also, is everything aligning with our Redmond 2050 themes of equity, inclusion, sustainability, and resiliency? And so we also ask folks, if you see any opportunity, and this has already been kind of a no answer, but do you see any opportunities for consolidation, any repeated or redundant topics, policy direction, or priorities? And that gets back to our goal for Redmond 2050 has been, and this hasn't really come to fruition, but our goal has been to have about 20 to 30 policies under our elements. That way that they provide enough flexibility without getting too detailed. That being said, as it's noted there, we currently have, I think, 38 policies in this draft element and 3 framework policies. But that being said, as we kind of had this out in the public for the last couple of months and, talk with folks, we don't really see much opportunity to kind of consolidate. But that being said, if there are opportunities, appreciate that. So that's kind of my presentation on the element. We can just open it up for discussion, if there's any specific questions, or I can pull up the policies themselves if people want to talk about that. So either or. And I believe we'll be coming back in December or January with the second draft. So,
Commissioner Weston.
All right, so I just had 2 general comments over the entire thing. The first is just how well done this is. The organization is excellent. And every time I started to be like, what about? Then the next section was exactly what had just occurred to me. So it was actually in conjunction with other documents that Redmond has already put together. It was just a huge relief to see this level of organization all in one place. So I just had compliments for everyone who's worked on it. The second comment is that in terms of what's missing, I feel like the really hard thing about climate policies sometimes are the trade-offs, and I don't really see that here yet. So that can be both within this document. So I was trying to think of examples, and you could have something like you could cut down trees and then get solar, or you could keep the trees and not have solar, like generation in an area. And there isn't, like, both of those have positives and negatives. And so it's kind of weighing that trade-off. I don't feel like that sort of decision is captured here. I also don't feel like there's a priority order necessarily, like if economic vitality comes first and then this is way down the list, or should this be guiding every decision that we're making in other areas? Like, it's just, the trade-off thing is where it gets really difficult to actually put these into practice. And I think there needs to be a little bit more guidance on like how to evaluate this, or where this fits in the decision process or something. So that I don't know how to pull that in, because it's a very broad piece, but it's what I could see preventing these great policies from actually getting
So when things
enacted.
where there's tension with other pieces in the
Yes.
comp plan, what wins?
Right. Or when there's tension even within this document, because, for example, you could pave a road to make it much bigger and then have a bus lane.
Right.
Or, there's just, they aren't simple choices a lot of the time. Anyway, I'm not sure exactly how to capture that here, but it was the big thing when I was trying to picture how it would end up influencing Redmond. I couldn't.
So
See.
we were kind of aware that, and that, we won't have Jeff speak, but he spoke eloquently to that, I think, on one of our other elements previously. But on CR4, which I put up on the screen for the community, is kind of gets to that. And this is actually a brand-new policy, as you can note in the column there. Does that capture that in those words? I don't know, but that was kind of our attempt to kind of recognize that, ultimately, comprehensive planning, land use planning is about growth, right? And, as city planners, we have to allow growth and people to use their property, to highest economic value. So it's balancing how we also create a sustainable and resilient community at the same time. And that's generally what our comprehensive plan, our zoning code, our development, environmental regulations try to do, right? Is to kind of temper that growth to also make it sustainable and resilient. So, that isn't what that policy says, but that was kind of what
I'd love if
the
that
intention
policy
is.
said that. That was actually one of the things I'd called out as, like, we need more here, because I think what you are saying there would really help, kind of that piece of confusion that I have. I think it's so important, and it should be. That's exactly the right policy, because it's saying something real, but it's not actionable yet.
Right. Okay. Commissioner Parna.
Jenny, Glenn, this is excellent work. I really like it, but I have to agree with Commissioner Weston that there is going to be a sort of a pecking order, if you will, on these things. So a suggestion would be to identify, yes, growth's important. So if you look at it fundamentally from a city perspective, what are the things that we have to provide to make sure the city goes on, and what is critical to the city? So if you look at it, everything else will pale in comparison. If you look at it in terms of, housing for everybody, or housing everybody, having water for everybody, having the lights on for everybody, right? So fundamentally, you would go with the idea that certain things in this will kind of rise to the top, and certain things will kind of come down to the bottom. they're nice to haves, must haves, and so on. So I think the policies might, I don't know if you want to go that far, but say that these are the things we definitely want to see everywhere, and these are things we would like to see if possible, if it doesn't kind of clash with other stuff. I've also submitted a lot of written comments on specific things. I hope you have received that.
We have received
But
that, yes.
thank you. I just want to say that overall, I think it's wonderful that we're thinking in terms of resilience, because too often, we're caught not knowing that this is an outcome that we are going to face. And with all the growth that is likely to come, it's good that we're thinking about what that actually means in a changing climate. So I think kudos to you guys for this. So thank you.
Commissioner Nueva Camino.
Glenn, I think that, and I think this goes along with what Commissioner Weston and Commissioner Parna had brought up around, what's the pecking order, or when there are competing commitments, then what is the process that we follow? And I think especially important now because I see our city shifting into being a value-based city. We're using new language, and we definitely are setting, being a model or an example for other cities to follow. So having that process, and then it gives us another opportunity to really demonstrate where our values are, and saying, okay, is it going to be strictly economic driven? And then we've just got to hold that mirror up to our face and be like, okay, no, we're economic driven. That's our value. Or are our values going to come in with the themes that are throughout the comp plan for equity, inclusion, sustainability, and resiliency? And I bring this up only because when an organization, or now even a city, when we start shifting and we're needing to make decisions, it's what is going to be more sustainable in the long run? Is it going to be the money motivator? Is it going to be the value motivator? And what is the longer sustainable piece? But then having that process of, here are these competing commitments that we have, and this is where we stand. And that just being clear, because then it's like, nope, this is what we're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So I have a specific thing on the very last one, NE 133, which is talking about continuing, implementing, and enforcing commute trip reduction programs to limit or reduce vehicle trips and emissions. And
Can you speak to which one that is again? Sorry, I didn't.
it's the very, NE 133. It's the very last one.
Is it this one? We have updated it.
No, sorry, the new number was CR 26.
Okay, I just want to confirm, because,
Yeah.
I could walk through how we structured the document. So the ones in red are actually existing policies that we updated and moved to this element. And I included all those in the last, 2 or 3 pages of this document. And it kind of shows how we also updated them from the existing comp plan.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just want to provide that context for everybody.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Are existing commute trip reduction programs sufficient? I raise this in reference to our largest employer's recent refresh, where a huge underground parking structure was built, and they still provide free parking to all their employees. So, I mean, they have a commute trip reduction program, but when you're giving out free parking and they employ, 40, 50,000 people in our city, that's not exactly a huge incentive to not drive. So I wonder,
point.
is this policy sufficiently strong?
Okay, that's,
Commissioner Weston?
And also piggyback on that. So, as some of you may know, October is Bike and Walk to School Month. What I do see is a lot of voluntary commitments for kids to bike or walk to school instead of doing the drop-off line. However, the drop-off line is still very healthy, I would say. And so something that is a good start for a program, it's not producing the intended results. Like, parents are still just sitting in that line for however long it takes to drop off one child every single day and pick them up again a few hours later. So I just, and I participated in the commute trip reduction programs at that large employer years ago, and I can also attest that the parking garage was always full to the point that they needed valet parkers because there were so many more cars than spots. So I would love to see more innovations in that space. I think the intent is there. I don't think the participation is going to get us to our goals. And I know you can't force people to do things, but
I mean, we can have a stronger commute trip reduction program.
absolutely, like parking, paid parking.
Yeah.
Versus a free bus pass makes a difference. And like, actually, you can put things in place so that parents are incented to actually carpool at the very least if they're going to be going through those drop-off lines.
I live on Education Hill. I can't get out of my neighborhood certain times of day.
Absolutely. Anyway, so just echoing you.
Yeah.
so as a policy, perhaps more broader.
Yeah, I'm not
Something-
saying we
Yeah,
need to
okay.
target Microsoft. I'm just
Yeah.
using Microsoft as an example of, they have a commute trip reduction program theoretically, but it's not really working.
Or it might be working, but it's not enough.
Yeah, it might be working, but it's not sufficient.
Understood.
It's not helping us achieve our goals.
And is that more of a utilization of the program versus or a policy flaw in general that could be improved,
It's
that could
a-
help filter down to
I think
better
it's
programs?
Flaw in what was accepted by the city when it was proposed. But,
Okay.
so I think it's, yes, I think it's both a policy flaw in that the city felt comfortable accepting a commute trip reduction plan that was insufficient, and it's not utilized because they provide free parking. And free parking is always going to be more convenient than other options for the most part. Commissioner Nueva Camino.
Well, I live in downtown Redmond. My office is in downtown Bellevue. I am fortunate that I don't have to go into my office every day, and there's a lot of work that I do from home. And even with those commutes, about 50% of my time I do take the bus. One, it's the responsible thing to do. Two, I've got to make sure that I've got the margins in my day to do that as a single parent, because that can be really difficult. But three, it's either that or I'm paying $300 a month for my parking. And that's a significant business expense that I don't want to take on, $300 per month for parking, because I think that there's other ways that I'd rather spend that money. And it has been a huge influencer for me to take advantage of those days where I do have some more margin in my day as far as time goes, and go ahead and hop on that beeline.
Good.
So what I'm hearing actually in both of your comments are that the incentives on the existing plans aren't aligned with what actually changed behavior. The incentive on paid parking, for example, versus the bus option is aligned with Commissioner Nueva Camina's, like what her needs are and what would change her behavior, just as an example.
Yeah. I'm just saying, either, we need to revisit what our commute trip reduction programs are, or we need a stronger policy to achieve the goals we want to achieve.
Okay.
It's not targeting Microsoft, it's just saying, we have goals we want to achieve. What are our tools for
How do
achieving
we
them?
better incentivize the private sector?
Yes,
Or, yeah.
yeah.
And the schools, please. Because it really,
Yeah.
they're a huge driver of traffic, and they don't provide buses for the vast majority of kids. And so you really get into a situation, like, once you're out of the elementary level, if you're more than 2 miles from a middle school, or 5 or 10, 5 miles from a high school, then they will consider providing busing for you. But that's really, it's 1 mile for elementary, but a lot of times that isn't actually, depending on the roads and the exact situation, 1 mile for a kindergartner is a long walk. So, and possibly not safe. And so I just, I think that that's an area, I totally understand the bus driver issue and how hard it is to hire, but it's still, they could do a lot more with creative use of carpools or
Metro
something.
could do a lot more too.
Metro could too. So but that's a real problem, and you see it just in traffic patterns at the times of day. People avoid trips to certain areas, can't get out, et cetera. It's very real.
I mean, Metro gives them bus passes, but it doesn't do any good if they don't go where they need to go.
Or at the times. So like they moved the high school times, for example, this year. So their new start and end times, the Metro routes have not been adjusted. So high schoolers who were able to take the public transportation last year cannot use it this year because those buses do not drive at the times that match the school hours.
Okay. That's my soapbox.
Thank you.
Are there any other thoughts, comments, concerns, concerns for Glenn tonight? If more arise, you can always send him an email.
Yes, we're still collecting comments. We have some thoughts of, additional policies or how we're going to clean up some of the language, just from a lot of the comments we've received. A partner has sent us some stuff to, it's been shared with the Planning Commission, and we've actually shared that with a lot of broader staff, Public Works and everything, so that they've been looking at that too, and just thinking about that. So we'll have an issues matrix responding to some of that, and as we noted, we'll have a second draft. Probably very similar, but there will be some changes that, so we have some notes of how we want to change that, and it'll also include narrative as we do our drafts, which will provide a little bit, will provide more context to how these policies are kind of structured and laid out. So hopefully that'll provide. Right now, you just see 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe doesn't provide all that context. So hopefully the narrative with the vision statement and everything will provide a little bit clearer picture as we move forward with that. We also want to show how this element also kind of ties into some of our other elements. So like, we have a whole transportation element, right? That, it's very intentional about switching to multimodal and kind of, reducing vehicle miles traveled and things like that. So we don't, not to use a bad analogy, but we don't want to step in their lane kind of thing. But at the same time, we want to acknowledge that transportation is an important part of climate reduction. So that's where it gets back to, we don't want to get into too much transportation, but we also want to acknowledge that, transportation and those issues are very important issues in terms of climate resilience and greenhouse gas reduction, so.
Commissioner Nueva Camina.
Glenn, you had opened up with sharing some numbers, and my apologies, I was reading something while you were talking, and you had mentioned that we are, essentially paraphrasing, we are ahead of the game and we are leading in this area. Could you say just a little bit more about that? Because I think that that's something that we should be talking more about. Because folks love to hear like what a great job that we're doing, so then they can get on board. And we're talking about increasing participation inside of community and changing behaviors.
Jenny might be able to add a little bit more, but let me just provide, and not to throw you on the spot, Jenny, but I can provide a little bit. And what I was noting that, and there are other communities doing this. I'm not going to preclude that other communities aren't, but we've been really good about having policies already in the last 10 years related around climate resiliency and greenhouse gas reduction. It's been kind of embedded in a lot of our programs already, but we also had the climate vulnerability assessment. We've done that work already, which is a new requirement, so we've already done that. We have the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, which is our main kind of linchpin document, and a lot of communities haven't even done anything like that. Our council, our mayor has been very proactive in terms of, having the climate emergency declaration, and just having that embedded in our community strategic plan. Like if you read that document, there's a lot of intentionality towards greenhouse gas, climate reduction. And we've done some great things. The city of Redmond, what I'm kind of excited about is we have the first electric fire truck coming. I think I heard, I thought it was the first one in the state, but I heard it's like one of the first anywhere that, so we're pretty innovative in that. Some other notes, there was a couple of gaps or some things like for our ESAP update that we were working on too was, but we also had, we added some policies around carbon sequestration and embodied carbon. And that's related, embodied carbon. I'm not 100% on the definition, but that's really the whole process of building a structure, right? There's trucks that have to drive the materials back and forth, right? It costs it uses a lot of energy to make cement and to run drills and, staff members driving back and forth in their trucks. All that is energy that goes into a building. It isn't just, to manufacture the steel. That's the concept of embodied carbon. So that's something else we're trying to be aware of and intentional about, reducing that number, which, we can really just say the term in the comp plan, but they're really deep dives, as we build new structures, our capital facilities and things like that, being intentional, where our staff are, sourcing materials and bids and all those kind of really day-to-day nitty-gritty kind of things where they're conscious that, we want to reduce kind of those carbon things. So I would say that's kind of where we're being very proactive and on that, so.
Thank you.
Yep. And Jenny, did you want to add anything on that?
That was a great answer, Glenn. I would say the only thing I just want to kind of emphasize is the climate vulnerability assessment that was completed last year. And so thanks to the foresight and just willingness to partner with Becky Fry, the work, she basically made space for us to say, hey, this is really important. We need to be weaving our kind of resilience into the draft EIS and the whole comp plan update. So it was because Becky saw the value of that we were able to really authentically weave the climate vulnerability assessment into this whole process. So big hats off to Becky and the team too for just seeing the importance of that work. And so that's one in particular that I think really sets Redmond apart in how we're proactively complying with House Bill 1181. So just want to make sure that that's super clear too, because I really appreciate Becky's partnership and collaboration.
Commissioner Aparna.
I also think I want to add something which I think staff is being very modest here, because I think the whole idea of the climate vulnerability assessment, Becky didn't not just see how like very far ahead, but it's basically the science behind which everything gets built. It's the data-driven approach. It's not something that words just thrown on a paper saying, hey, this sounds good. It's basically what the community needs in terms of resilience. And they've taken the scientific approach, and I am a sustainability professional. I work in carbon accounting space, and I will tell you this, that the embodied carbon piece especially, most people are not even thinking about it. They don't want to touch it with a barge pole because it's so complicated and so far reaching. So it's awesome that the city is even starting to think about tackling it. So kudos to staff. They've done a wonderful job on this.
Okay, anything else on this topic tonight? Great. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments, and thank you.
And we'll move on to staff and commissioner updates. That's you again.
We don't have any particular updates. Jeff, was there anything particular? No. I think Jeff had mentioned at the last meeting that our next meeting was October 26th. Members of our community advisory committee will be here. Otherwise, we just have continued Redmond 2050 topics.
Okay.
Yep, that's
great. Any commissioner updates? Anybody want to share anything? Okay. Then I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.